Daniel Harris was the kind of man people naturally trusted. At 37, he carried himself with quiet confidence, always polite, always helpful. He was the guy who offered to mow the neighbor's lawn when their mower broke or stayed late at work, to help a colleague meet a deadline. He lived with his wife Olivia and their 2 children, Maddie, 9, and Ethan, 6, in a neat 2-story house in Asheville's suburban neighborhood. On weekends, he'd be seen fixing bikes with his son or helping Maddie with her science projects. From the outside, everything looked ideal. Their family photos, always perfectly posed, always smiling, decorated their living room wall, giving the impression of a life untouched by stress or scandal. Every summer, the Harris family hosted a large family reunion at a lakeside cabin that had been in Olivia's family for decades. The cabin was surrounded by tall pine trees, with a view of the still, glassy lake that reflected the clouds like a mirror. The tradition had started even before Olivia and Daniel were married, and it had become something the whole extended family looked forward to each year. Cousins flew in from distant cities, elderly relatives came with old photo albums and stories, and children ran wild in the open spaces, far from the noise of the city. This particular summer, Olivia had put extra effort into organizing the event. She planned every detail meticulously, matching napkins for each table, customized welcome baskets in every room, and a schedule filled with games, meals, and campfires. Daniel praised her endlessly, calling her the glue that held the family together. His compliment sounded genuine, and Olivia felt proud, believing their marriage was stronger than ever. What she didn't know was that while she was busy making everything perfect, Daniel was hiding something far from perfect. In the weeks leading up to the reunion, Daniel had started spending more time at work. He claimed there were late-night deadlines, new client demands, and unexpected project revisions. Olivia believed him. After all, he had always been dedicated to his job. But those late nights weren't always spent in front of a computer screen. Some were spent in hotel rooms, some ended in dimly lit bars, and at the center of it all was Lisa Monroe, a junior architect who had joined Daniel's firm just a year ago. Daniel told himself it wasn't serious. Lisa was just a distraction, a way to feel alive again after years of routine. He convinced himself he still loved Olivia, that he was a good father. The affair was just a mistake, something he could control, something that would eventually end. But emotions aren't always so simple. What started as casual turned into secret messages, midnight meetings, and promises whispered between the chaos of real life. As the reunion weekend approached, Daniel felt the pressure build. He promised himself it would be the last time he saw Lisa, that he'd end it after the reunion. But deep down, he knew that promise was already broken. The second day of the reunion dawned with the scent of bacon drifting from the cabin kitchen and children's laughter echoing across the lawn. Olivia was in her element, pouring coffee for the early risers, organizing a lakeside breakfast and checking in on each guest to make sure they were comfortable. Daniel sat on the porch, seemingly relaxed, sipping his coffee while scanning the group. But inside, he was tense. He had received a message the night before from Lisa. She was nearby. She wanted to see him. Against his better judgment, he had agreed. Late that morning, while most of the family was gathered by the dock watching the kids fish, a car pulled into the gravel driveway, a sleek black sedan that no one recognized. The door opened, and out stepped Lisa Monroe, casually dressed in jeans and sunglasses, holding a bottle of wine and a crooked smile that suggested confidence and danger all at once. Everyone paused. Daniel stood up too quickly, knocking his cup over. but recovered with an awkward grin. Olivia, ever the gracious host, walked over to greet the stranger, not realizing the storm she had just welcomed into their peaceful gathering. Lisa introduced herself as Daniel's co-worker who happened to be passing through the area. She claimed she remembered Daniel mentioning the reunion and thought she'd drop by with a gift for the family. The explanation didn't make much sense. Why would a co-worker show up uninvited to a private family event? But Olivia, busy managing guests and children, brushed it off. She welcomed Lisa with a hug and introduced her to the others. The family was polite but curious. Some whispered, among themselves exchanging glances. Daniel's cousin Megan raised an eyebrow, her instincts quietly kicking in. Lisa's presence shifted the atmosphere. Though she smiled and chatted politely, there was a sharpness to her words, a tension behind her charm. She stuck close to Daniel, always finding a reason to be near him, commenting on a shared office joke, asking about a client they both worked with, or offering to help him grill. Olivia didn't notice much at first, too busy to see the small moments between them, the way their eyes locked for just a second too long, the quick exchanges that ended abruptly when others approached. Megan, however, noticed everything. She had seen Lisa before, months ago, in a completely different setting, outside a downtown restaurant, laughing with Daniel as they left together well past midnight. At the time, she had dismissed it, thinking maybe they had been working late, or meeting for a work dinner. But now, with Lisa here, completely out of place, her earlier suspicion resurfaced with a vengeance. Lisa stayed for hours. What was meant to be a quick visit turned into lunch, then drinks, then a lakeside walk with Daniel that no one else was invited to join. Olivia was beginning to wonder why Lisa hadn't left yet, but she didn't voice it aloud. She trusted her husband. Megan no longer did. The morning sun filtered through the trees as birds chirped over the quiet rustle of leaves. Most of the family was still asleep, exhausted from the previous night's games and laughter. But Megan was already up, sitting by the window in her guest room, replaying the events of the day before. Something wasn't right. Lisa's sudden arrival, Daniel's stiff behavior, the strange tension that hummed beneath their interactions. She couldn't shake the image of them sneaking away together, whispering in the shadows while the rest of the family laughed around the bonfire. Megan made a decision. She slipped on her sneakers, grabbed her phone, and stepped outside. The dew clung to her shoes as she followed a narrow trail behind the cabin that led into the woods. It was a path many of the family members used to reach the lake's quieter side. She walked slowly, eyes scanning the trees, heart pounding with both fear and curiosity. After about 15 minutes, she saw movement up ahead, two figures standing close to each other near a worn-out picnic bench, partly hidden by thick shrubs. It was Daniel and Lisa. They didn't see her. Megan crouched low behind a tree and watched. There was no denying it now. They were embracing. Not like co-workers, not like friends. Their closeness was intimate, their body language too familiar. Megan's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and snapped a few photos from a distance. The images were blurry but clear enough to tell the story. As they parted, Lisa leaned in and whispered something to Daniel. He looked around nervously, then walked deeper into the woods, leaving Lisa behind. Megan didn't follow him. She stayed hidden until Lisa turned and began walking back toward the cabin. Only then did Megan stand, her mind racing. She now had proof. But what would she do with it? Confront Daniel? Show Olivia? Was she ready to destroy a family gathering, even if it meant exposing the truth? She slipped back into the cabin unnoticed and locked herself in her room. The rest of the day went on as if nothing had happened. Lisa acted like she belonged there, helping with dinner and laughing at every joke. Daniel avoided Megan, never meeting her eyes. He was different now, on edge, distracted. Megan watched him closely. She could see the gears turning in his head, the fear creeping into his face. Something had changed in him. He was no longer just hiding an affair. He was afraid of being found out. What Megan didn't realize was that during that moment in the woods, when she raised her phone to take those pictures, a glint of sunlight had reflected off the screen. Daniel had noticed. He had caught a glimpse of someone hiding. He didn't know who it was at first, but the possibility that someone had seen them terrified him. That night, he barely spoke to anyone. His smiles were forced, his laughter hollow. A reunion, meant to be a celebration of love and family, was unraveling. And Megan, who only wanted the truth, had unknowingly stepped into a much darker story than she had ever expected. The morning began with an uneasy stillness. The usual sounds of clinking dishes, children's footsteps, and casual chatter were missing. One by one, family members realized something was off. Megan's room was empty. Her bed was neatly made, untouched since the night before. Her phone, usually glued to her hand, was nowhere in sight. Her car keys were still on the nightstand, and her suitcase hadn't been touched. At first, everyone assumed she had gone for an early walk or run. But as hours passed and no one heard from her, the mood shifted from confusion to concern. Olivia tried to stay calm, organizing a search around the cabin and the nearby trails. Daniel joined in, his face pale but composed. He suggested they split into groups and check the woods, the lake, and the nearby roads. His tone was steady, his instructions clear, but behind his words was a quiet panic he tried to suppress. He knew she hadn't just wandered off. Deep down, he feared the worst. Megan had those pictures, and now she was missing. The search lasted all day. They called her name through the forest, checked nearby gas stations and diners, even alerted park rangers. But there was no sign of her. As night fell, fear turned into dread. Olivia called the police, her voice trembling as she explained the situation. Officers arrived at the cabin, asking routine questions. When Megan was last seen, what she was wearing, whether she'd had any disagreements with anyone. Daniel answered calmly, saying she'd seemed quiet lately but offered nothing more. Olivia stayed close, unaware that every word her husband spoke was carefully rehearsed. It didn't take long for police to sense something strange. Megan's phone had last pinged from the woods behind the cabin, but then it went dark. No outgoing messages, no calls, no social media activity. When they checked with nearby businesses, one piece of surveillance footage from a gas station caught their attention. Daniel's car leaving the area around midnight, with Lisa in the passenger seat. The timestamp didn't match Daniel's claim of being in bed all night. Detectives returned to the cabin the next morning. They asked more pointed questions this time. Why had Daniel and Lisa left the reunion late at night? Why hadn't he mentioned it before? His answers were vague. He claimed Lisa had needed a ride to her motel and that they'd only been gone an hour. But Olivia was hearing this for the first time, and her face went pale. Until that moment, she had believed in her husband without question. A search warrant was issued. Officers combed through the woods, this time with dogs and forensic experts. The mood around the cabin turned cold. Relatives stayed indoors, whispering in corners, watching as investigators moved with urgency and focus. Olivia sat on the porch, holding a photo of Megan, eyes red from crying. Daniel paced the edge of the property, silent and distant. Everyone had come for a family reunion. Now they were trapped in the middle of a growing investigation, and Daniel, once the man everyone trusted, was slowly becoming the center of suspicion. 3. Days after Megan's disappearance, the search came to a tragic end. A team of officers combing through a dense patch of forest half a mile from the cabin made a discovery no one wanted to believe. Beneath a thin layer of soil and scattered leaves, they found Megan's body. Her clothes were the same as she had worn the day she vanished. Her hands were bruised, her head bore signs of blunt force trauma, and her expression, frozen in terror, told a story words couldn't. Nearby, buried in a separate spot, was her phone. The screen was cracked, but the data was retrievable. Forensic experts worked quickly. Fingerprints were lifted from the phone, and dirt from Megan's clothing was matched to the gloves found in Daniel's car trunk. The photos she had taken in the woods were still on the device, grainy but damning. Daniel and Lisa, locked in a quiet embrace, hidden among trees. The timestamps lined up with the moment Megan had gone missing. The evidence was growing too strong to ignore. Daniel was brought in for questioning. At first, he denied everything, insisting Megan must have wandered off and fallen. But when investigators presented the phone data, the surveillance footage, and the inconsistencies in his statements, cracks began to show. Hours into the interrogation, Lisa was also brought in. Under pressure, she broke first. In a trembling voice, she confessed to the affair and what had happened that night. She told detectives that Daniel had grown increasingly paranoid after spotting someone in the woods. He believed someone had followed them, maybe even taken pictures. He told her he would take care of it. Lisa claimed she didn't know exactly what he planned, but she feared the worst when he returned hours later, shaken and silent. He didn't say what he had done, but she saw dirt on his clothes and a cut on his hand. When news of Megan's disappearance spread, she knew something terrible had happened, but stayed silent out of fear. Daniel was arrested on charges of second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. The courtroom was packed weeks later when his trial began. Olivia sat in the back, pale and expressionless, her once bright world shattered beyond recognition. Family members testified in tears, recalling the reunion that turned into a nightmare. Prosecutors presented a clear timeline built on digital footprints, physical evidence, and Lisa's testimony. Daniel never spoke a word in court, staring blankly ahead as the details of his double life were revealed for all to see. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict. The judge called the crime a betrayal of both family and morality, sentencing Daniel to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Lisa, who cooperated with investigators, received a lesser sentence, but would still serve time for her role in the cover-up. The town of Asheville was left shaken. The man once praised as a loving father and husband had turned into a killer, driven by fear of being exposed. Megan's memory became a solemn reminder of how even in the most perfect-looking families, darkness can hide just beneath the surface. The reunion cabin was never used again. The laughter that once echoed through the trees had been replaced by silence, a haunting stillness where trust had died.